Here. Oops.
That's what you said, right?
Had to.
You sit here. Slowly, because someone's coming afterwards.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to the event, How Can the U.S. Support an Inclusive Digital Transformation in Africa? My name is Zainab Usman, and I'm the founding director of the Africa Program here at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. I'm delighted to welcome you here for the second event we are hosting this week on the margins of the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit. Yesterday, we hosted top policymakers from the U.S. and also from Africa, including the President of the Republic of Namibia, on how we can advance synergies in just energy transitions between the U.S. and African countries. This morning, we are shifting our focus on another strategic area central to the work of our program here at the Carnegie Endowment, as well as central to the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit at large, and this is on digital technologies. The technology initiative at the Carnegie Endowment's Africa Program offers analysis on Africa's digital transformation with practical policy insights to bridge the digital divide and increase connectivity gains across the continent. We are thus very much delighted to host an esteemed panel of African stakeholders and representatives from the U.S. government to discuss how the United States can partner with African countries to promote innovation and build an inclusive digital economy. Digital technologies, as you know, can spur economic growth and shared prosperity. The African continent is experiencing a digital revolution in some ways, driven by increased access to tech products and services. And as you know, Africa currently has the world's largest number of mobile money accounts, which is one very good example of some of the digital revolutions we're seeing in certain sectors and industries. These digital technologies will shape Africa's growth trajectory, fostering economic opportunities, creating jobs, and providing innovative solutions to complex challenges in health, in energy, in education, and in finance. Digital platforms and services are, in some ways, really improving the lives of citizens. The International Finance Corporation, for example, notes that digitalization could contribute up to $180 billion to Africa's economy by 2025 and could top $712 billion by 2050. Could, it's a conditional statement. The factors that inform this forecast include the youthful population of the continent, rising smartphone adoption and internet penetration, all of which have led to a burgeoning tech ecosystem across Egypt, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Senegal, and a couple of other countries. Entrepreneurs are taking innovative ideas to the market in healthcare, in finance, in energy, and financial inclusion. Today, the continent is home to around 7 unicorns, startups worth over $1 billion. And of course, not to precede the introduction of panelists, we're going to have the CEO of one of those tech unicorns join us shortly. He's running a bit late. The CEO of Flutterwave. However, the digital revolution also comes with risks and certain challenges, so it's not all rosy. There are disparate rates of technological diffusion, limited internet connectivity, and restricted access to remote areas, which are very much stark in certain parts of the continent. Only 33% of Africans are connected to the internet, according to the International Telecommunications Union. In an increasingly digitalized world, the unconnected could be further marginalized, and existing inequalities could be further exacerbated. Connecting the unconnected is therefore an imperative to achieve the full benefits of digital transformation. Of course, we're in a very changing geopolitical landscape, to say the least. And some of these geopolitical risks, a lot of countries, including in Africa, would have to contend with them. As we know here in DC, there's a lot of talk around decoupling of different economies, which create opportunities and risks for a lot of countries around the world, including in Africa. The leadership in digital innovation, standards, and norms is a key U.S. priority. Per recent policy documents released here in the U.S., including the new National Security Strategy, the U.S. seeks to advance an international technology ecosystem that protects the integrity of international standards development and promotes the free flow of data and ideas. It recognizes the necessity of providing high-quality digital infrastructure in low and middle-income countries, bridging digital divides by emphasizing access among marginalized groups, and a number of other strategic objectives. Relatedly, the U.S. strategy toward Sub-Saharan Africa, which was released in August this year, set forth an important agenda for the U.S. to deepen engagement in areas such as digital transformation. These two strategy documents are supported by pre-existing policy initiatives, such as the Partnership for Global Investment and Infrastructure, which was launched during the G7 summit in June this year. And it aims, among other things, to support low and middle-income countries to secure high-standard investment for critical digital infrastructure. And the U.S. Agency for International Development has a digital strategy, and we have a representative of the USAID here, the Chief Technology Officer. He's going to help us walk through some key elements of the strategy in terms of how they relate to Africa. We had another expert from the U.S. Trade and Development Agency who was supposed to join us. Unfortunately, she is unwell. And I have to tell you, there are bugs and COVID and flu and all sorts of things going around. So please be very mindful during this summit. I guess a key question that we hope to address during the course of the next 1 hour or so is really around understanding the opportunities and risks for policymakers, investors, and partners to reduce Africa's digital divide so as to fully maximize the benefits of digital transformation. I hope that we're able to address questions such as understanding the synergies and areas of collaboration between U.S. priorities as expressed in various policy documents and Africa's own priorities for closing that digital divide. What policies and regulatory frameworks will be crucial on this front in increasing innovations and investments to achieve an inclusive digital transformation? Hopefully this dialogue will, it's going to be one of many. This is perhaps the first event we are hosting the Carnegie Africa Program on digital technologies. And as if you're not aware, this is one of our key pillars of focus. We have about 4. The event we did on climate reflected one of those pillars. Tech is another core pillar. So this is not a one-off event. It's really part of ongoing work. Our panelists today, and they're going to come in shortly because they are really the experts here, bring expertise from government, from the private sector, and from civil society. Again, someone else was supposed to join us, our lead on tech in the Africa program as moderator, but again, she's also ill. Just why I said, there are bugs going around, so please be very careful. If you have a mask, if you feel comfortable, please wear it. I would encourage you to do that. So the first person I want to introduce today is Engineer John Tenui. He is Principal Secretary of the State Department for ICT and Digital Economy in the Republic of Kenya. He is the Principal Secretary of that State Department, and previous to his appointment, he was Chief Executive Officer of Konza Technopolis,
Yes, Technopolis.
Technopolis, a smart city project by the government of Kenya. He's also an engineer with over 24 years of training and experience. I invite you to go online to read his very extensive biography. The second person I want to introduce is Mr. Lasina Kone. He's the Director General and Chief Executive Officer of Smart Africa. He oversees the process of defining and advancing Africa's digital agenda and has overseen the development of continental blueprints for digital identity, information and telecommunications, startups and innovation ecosystems, smart villages, and a whole range of things. He's gonna walk us through what Smart Africa does, for those of you who are not aware of this excellent initiative. And then we have Mr. Christopher Burns. He is the Chief Digital Development Officer for the U.S. Agency for International Development and is the Director for the Technology Division within the Innovation, Technology, and Research Hub. He coordinates and tracks programmatic digital development investments across the agency. He represents USAID's programmatic digital technology work across various agencies and with external stakeholders and partners. Again, I invite you to read his bio online. Hopefully, our fourth speaker is going to join us very soon. So I'm going to turn to Engineer John Tenue. And if it's okay, if we could be on a first-name basis. I don't want to mix up your titles and accomplishments. As we know, an inclusive digital economy requires an effective, I would say, regulatory environment, which will attract investment to enable broadband adoption and bridge the digital divide. But this policy and regulatory environment shouldn't also stifle innovation. So it should be able to strike a very fine balance. Can you highlight some of the key policy innovations in Kenya's digital strategy or strategies? And how are you positioning, you and of course the agency you represent, how are you positioning Kenya to better benefit from the dividends of digital transformation?
Thank you, Zainab. First, I want to appreciate Carnegie Endowment for the National Peace for arranging this very important conversation on inclusive digital transformation in Africa. We appreciate the support and collaboration over the years from the U.S. government and the U.S. agencies. There's quite a lot that's happening in Africa, especially in the digital transformation. Our strength being our youthful population, very quick for adaptation of new technologies. Kenya has made great strides in the region, among the top 3 in many aspects, whether it is in global innovation index, whether it is in attraction of startup funds, and many other statistics. And this has been enabled by the legislative, legal frameworks that has already been put in place. We are privileged that 2010, the Kenyan government established a new constitution, one of the most progressive constitutions in the continent, which really laid a strong foundation, strong bills of rights, which are some of the enablement for some of the digital transformation. We have recently put in place additional legislative framework. Of course, we've had the Kenya Information and Communications Act. This laid the foundation of the sector, the ICT space in the country, and led even establishment of a universal fund. This is the universal fund for reaching the digital gap, ensuring there is funds to support coverage or network infrastructure where it's not commercially viable. So that has laid the foundations. Recently, with the emergence of growth in data, we saw it fit, and the country established the Data Protection Act which improve the environment in which we work on. There are other acts of parliament, the Access to Information Act and the Films and Stage Act. We've also seen in the entire science, technology, and innovation ecosystem, establishment of institutions that will help to guide the country. We established National Council of Science, Technology, and Innovation. We established an agency for innovation, which is called Kenya National Innovation Agency, and a research fund, a fund to support innovations and promising ideas. We've also seen the country establish specific institutions, like institution I was leading, the Concert Technopolis Development Authority, to build a smart city from scratch, adopting latest technologies, working with top global players. In that city, the master plan was developed by one of the leading American companies, Tetra Tech, with other partners, to lay the foundation for innovation, technology, and knowledge economy. So in the legislative environment, quite a lot has been done to make sure the country can move forward. We are currently considering new bills to really take it to the next level. The digital economy bill is under discussion. Startup bill has started the journey to see how do we enable startups to grow, because that's still our biggest challenge. The ideas are good, innovations are there, but we are not scaling up to a successful stage. We're looking also how to enhance our infrastructure, because that's still a challenge, especially on broadband, to reach the last mile. And also we're realizing as a country of 50 million population, we have about 63 million, 65 million devices, but majority are still 3G and below. So we need to look even how to use our universal fund. Previously, we used to just build a network, but now to use it to also provide incentives for devices. And that's areas we are looking at collaborating with the American partners to work with us on the areas of skilling, to work with us on the area of building the infrastructure from all the way submarine to the devices across the metro networks, and ensuring that the broadband can be actually realized by the end user. And most of these technologies are driven by American firms, and we're looking how to work with USDDA and other agencies to see how we can do any bridging, whether it's on the policy and legislative or partnership environment, to enable realization of real broadband to the last person. And the training part is going to be quite important for us. Why? Because we think we need to train the users, we need to participate on the growth of the sector, and also to play at the global stage and support the other actors across the world.
Thank you very much for that. I have a follow-up question, but I think I'm going to keep it for now. And it's specifically on the startup bill.
Yes.
So I'll give it a few minutes. I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Now I want to go to Lasina Kone. Can you tell us a bit more about Smart Africa? It's seen as a kind of catalyst platform in a sense, and you work in collaboration with governments, about 35 or so across the continent, as well as the private sector, on Africa's digital economy. Can you tell us more about really what you do? Because I'm sure there are people here who do not know about Smart Africa. But then also tell us what trends you're starting to see, or how those trends are shifting with respect to digital transformation across the continent.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me, first of all, for this event. To start, first of all, digital transformation, first of all, is about transformation of mindset. Simple as that. We've been talking for the past 62 years since the independence of most of our countries. It's all talking. To walk our talk, 2013, 7 heads of the state came together to establish Smart Africa as a catalyzer and accelerator for digital transformation. Why? Because if policy is about just disseminations, which is just talking, we need to be walking our talk. Remember, We've been saying Africa has an opportunity for the past 70 years. Opportunity is a possibility. It can be positive, or it can be negative. So they came together and created Smart Africa in 2013 and endorsed by the African Union in 2014 with 5 manifesto, 1 vision, 1 mission. The 5 manifesto, the first of all, to put the ICT at the center of our social economic development. Number 2, to accelerate the broadband on the continent. Number 3, to accelerate to accelerate transparency and efficiency using ICT. Number 4, which is very important, to put the private sector first. Number 5, to leverage all of the above for the birth of a digital economy and knowledge economy in Africa. By doing so, we're able to do this. Why? The conventional way of developing Africa, let's be very honest, it does not work. You cannot continue to be doing the same bilateral relationship since the independence and expect a different result. So how do we do this? It's basically Smart Africa is the only Pan-African organization which has a private sector on board. By the way, it's not 35 countries. As of yesterday, it's 36. Malawi joined. We are consisting of 1.1 billion populations in Africa. So we have the vision is to transform Africa into a single digital market by 2030. What is the mission? Is to drive Africa's digital agenda with a bold, innovative, multi-stakeholder approach. The multi-stakeholder approach, that's where it comes in, how we do it. It basically, we have governments, we have a private sector, we have institutional partner, we have a civil society, sit around the table. The ministers, we have also a consultative organ, which is a CMICT, Council of Ministers of ICT in Africa. They meet 3 times a year. And we have a Council of African Regulator, consultative. They meet also 3 times a year. And we have a board meeting twice a year. And we have a private sector forum. All these stakeholders need to be around the table to be able to walk our talk. So far, we have about 34 initiatives, 12 projects in the pipeline as a pilot. But how do we do that? Countries don't join just to have a rubber stamp. No, you join, you have a flagship project. For example, Kenya was a champion for digital economy. We worked with Kenya to come up with digital economy flagship of Kenya, and Kenya was able to elaborate digital economy strategy for the next 10 years. Burkina Faso is ICT skills. Tunisia is the Startup Act. Rwanda is a smart city. South Africa is artificial intelligence and blockchain.
Let me follow up quickly. So you're saying for any country that joins has to have a flagship project?
You have to have a project, because it represents a piece of the puzzle in the ecosystem of digital economy. So once you develop a flagship project, a blueprint for the country, we scale it up. It's a best practice sharing among ourselves. So how do we do that? We take the emerging technology from the concept phase to the blueprint, to the pilot. Since we have a private sector on board, it has to be bankable. Then it's a public service concession to private sector, which is a response to most of the questions that our Minister of ICT have. We do not have a budget. Everything is a stress. We do not have a budget. Digital transformation project has to be bankable, because you cannot wake up a government worker at 3 o'clock in the morning with the SLA for data center. It means government has to be there to create a conducive environment for private sector to be able to take the service and run with it. I will just stop here. This is a little bit about the ecosystem of Smart Africa. We're able to do this because the board member, the board director are the head of the state themselves. Below that, we have a steering committee made of ICT ministers and the private sector, gold and platinum member. And we have a Smart Africa Secretariat, and we have a consultative organ. This is how we're able to initiate all these things together.
Before I bring in Chris, and I'm stalling a bit because I'm hoping Wenger can join us. I have a follow-up question for you, Lassina, and also for you, John. Absolutely, we cannot deny the digital transformation happening across the continent, fintech in particular, but also other industries. And there is obviously a necessity of making sure that whatever innovations are happening, the enabling environment is created to be able to scale them up, right? We want to see more diffusion of tech, broadly, digital tech in particular, across different sectors and industries. At the same time, this is just me being a bit provocative, being devil's advocate. What is different this time around? If other types of economic transformation haven't moved as quickly as we would want them to, what is different this time around? And to you too, John, you mentioned the startup bill. Nigeria too has a startup bill which has now been enacted into law, I think. And then a question is, I'm putting myself in the position of a micro, small, and medium-scale enterprise that is not doing anything on tech. Why is a tech startup different from an SME? Why does it require a specific legislation just for a certain industry? Right? Again, this is just me being devil's advocate to push you to explain to us what is different this time around that warrants this optimism you're sharing.
Okay, first, starting with the startups. Why is it different from the normal SMEs? I think startups presents a great opportunity for transformation of our economies as a country because of the speed it takes to have impact, the scalability, and the impact. So I think that's the separation from the normal SME. And most of these startups also ride on the digital platform. So they are kind of these companies we can call born global. You start and it scales up quite quickly. So what's different the continent is doing? I think there is a lot. If you measure the progress over the years, irrespective of the challenges that has been mentioned, budgets, our competing interests to address the food, healthcare, there's quite a lot that has been done. If you look at the infrastructure in terms of the connectivity, there's quite a lot that has happened. There's still gaps, and that's what we mentioned, like last mile, the devices component, which needs to be addressed. And you can see, taking an example of a country, for Kenya, as mentioned from the Smart Africa engagement and countries focusing on specific area, you can see the refocus. The current government of Kenya has set up a specific ministry for ICT and digital economy, and that is a graduation of what had been initiated about a digital blueprint for the country. And looking at this is to see now how to take it to the next level. And in respect to the startups now, what would the startup bill address? Some of the things is the provide funding. One of the biggest challenges has been funding for the startups. We've had very good, successful startups, but most of those innovative young people actually exit at an early stage, which we think it should not be if there was funding and government support. So one would be funding. One other thing we'll be looking at is how do we ensure within even the public sector they are given opportunities to pilot their ideas and to be able to commercialize within a government platform and the country as it scales up, so that they are able to have a strong foundation to focus on the growth of the company and ensure even local ownership of such enterprises. Because besides solving the local problems, these startups presents opportunity to create employment. It presents opportunity to grow wealth within the continent. So, so the startup ecosystem presents a big opportunity for a country. It's different because of this time the initiatives being taken are focused and clear. You look at the Kenyan government, some of the initiative we are talking about now is a digital superhighway. Means broadband or capacity looking from connection to the international, from submarine cables, the national backbone infrastructure within the urban centers, vibrant metro infrastructure, and looking at the last mile now. And we are not living at the broadband to specific location. We are looking at ensuring the public have the right devices to access broadband. That's smart phones to ensure that they are able to enjoy the services. The government also is looking at how to digitize. We have about 15% of all government applications accessible currently online. We have a commitment with the current leadership, with our president, to ensure that we achieve 80% within the next 6 months, and probably within 2 years to reach close to 100%. So we have to run all these things parallel, because even if you have digital 100% available, but you have no devices or not global access. So these targets now we are looking at how to bridge. And we have a lot of pressure because of our young people. We have a huge talent within the country with limited opportunities. But when we travel and look at the global stage, there is huge demand for talent. And this is one of the opportunities we want to bridge. How do we link the opportunities of talent globally, whether it's in the North America, Europe, and the other, and skill and provide these opportunities and skill our people to be able to bridge and provide the talent. We are very impressed to see some of the top technology companies from U.S. set up development centers in the continent and developing products not only for our consumption in the continent, but applications and products for global use. And we think this is the direction we should, and the African continent would need to play that bigger role even in the engagement. And this is probably one of the support areas that we are looking. How can the talent in Africa be useful for the global use, for addressing the needs in the digital space, because the digital growth is global. And
Great.
Africa presents a strength in having the tech talent that can support this journey.
Okay, Lassina, any response to that very quickly, and then we'll go to Chris. And welcome, Benga. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, if the why now? Why do you think now it's going to work?
Yeah.
It's very simple. Low barrier to entry in the scale. What made America America? It's a scale. What made China China? It's a scale. All we're trying to do with Smart Africa is a policy harmonization for investors to look at Africa as 1.3 billion market. Take that number, for example. What's the definition of a unicorn? Any company valuation above $1 billion? Literally speaking, it means that every single startup in Africa, if you develop an application and you sell it for $1 a day, how many unicorns we can create a day? That is the opportunity. But in order to get there, we need to harmonize our policy. That's the reason we launched with Tunisia Startup Act, which is today being enacted in Kenya, Senegal, Nigeria, Ghana, Mali, Burkina Faso. For our startup, you can be a startup in Morocco, and you can actually target the rest of the market on the continent. We want to stop being just the consumer in Africa. We want to be able to produce to be unicorn as well. Why not seeing one unicorn? I'm happy to see my brother here, to see a unicorn which is created in Africa. Why not? We only have 7, I believe. We're not a startup nation yet. So that's what is different. The youth population, policy harmonization, to be able to attract also, because investors, they do not like unpredictability. And that comes when the laws, such as Nigeria law, is different from Kenya. Kenya law is different from Senegal. No, we have over 50 regulatory environment. And that's what we do in Smart Africa to make all this work together.
Chris, I want to pivot to you. Can you tell us what has been USAID's approach to engaging with these digital transformations happening across Africa, and if there are any shifts happening with respect to this approach that USAID is taking to digital transformation in Africa, shifts resulting from any recent developments? So basically, just tell us what it is that you do, and if there are any changes.
Sure. Thanks, Zainab, and thanks to Carnegie and to the panelists and for those joining here and online. I suppose by way of start, I should just note, and I think it's relevant to this conversation so far, that quite simply in today's digital age, a country cannot meet its development objectives if it is not holistically embracing the responsible use of digital technology in all it does. And I think that's very much in line with Lassina's point around what the mindset is here. And to Zainab's question earlier of why now, what's different? Well, if you look at the investment that has been made across the continent over the past 20 years, and in some cases, particularly in Kenya's context, a deliberate investment that tracks everything from policy to infrastructure to services to capacity building, we're now at a moment that really is undeniable. And I think this uptick in this recognition, for me, it stems from 4 reasons. The first is we're much more attuned to the digital technologies around us in our personal lives, in our professional lives. We have our online lives fusing with our offline worlds, and we see the youth and people around us really embracing that. The second is we're also much more attuned to the very real risks of operating in today's digital age, be that the rise of misinformation or disinformation or online harassment or even higher levels of digital repression. Third, and for those of us who talk about this topic quite often, we've shared that certainly COVID itself has driven a rapid race to digitize services, both from the public sector and from the private sector. And what we've learned is countries that were well-positioned pre-COVID, because they put a lot of pieces and foundations in place, digitized quickly. Those that didn't actually exacerbated certain digital divides that we are now trying to address. And then fourth, perhaps more in our universe, is the USAID digital strategy that we released 2.5 years ago that I'll speak about momentarily, because it really, USAID has been working in this sector for over 25 years now. Some of our first investments were on the African continent, going back to the Leland Initiative, where we were building early infrastructure pre-mobile broadband. And it's continued, particularly over the past decade plus. A lot of our approach is certainly grounded in this idea of a digital ecosystem. Again, Lucina pointed out the need to look at this not from an applications perspective or from a services perspective, but what is that underpinning digital ecosystem that is going to allow Africa to thrive in everything that it's trying to do? For us, there are 3 key pieces. One is the digital infrastructure and the adoption of it. The second is this broader digital society, rights and governance. How do people engage online? And third is all the different components of a digital economy. And if you look across that digital ecosystem, yes, it's multidimensional. Yes, it's complex. Maybe it's a little overwhelming. But we've just noted over the years that if we, wherever you slot yourself into this, only concentrate on 1 or 2 pieces, we're actually undermining the value and full potential of digital transformation. And so we do look from everything from making sure that we are driving last mile connectivity for underserved communities, that we are making sure that people who are coming online for the first time are digitally literate and can operate in an online world safely and to their full socioeconomic livelihood benefit. We also do look at making sure that the policies and regulatory frameworks are in place and that they are done so in a way that advances the responsible use of digital technologies. Or if we talk about AI, making sure that ethics are brought into AI development. And we have a number of investments and programs and projects across all of those pieces, and I'm happy to share a few of them if there's time later on. But it's just to say that this idea that an investment in Africa's digital ecosystem has to be deliberate. It has to be holistic. It has to be done with a number of like-minded actors. It's not just the responsibility of a national government or the private sector, of course, which is very involved, but civil society needs to be engaged. Yes, there's a role for bilateral donors as well. And when you look at the African context and how its digital ecosystem is so vibrant and so thriving and so African-led, I really think it just impresses upon all of us that Africa is very open for business, but it's not just about dropping digital in there and walking away. It's actually about meeting Africa country by country, community by community, where they are and where they want to be in their pathway to true digital transformation. And we've arrived at a moment where 10 years ago, we were talking about the digital revolution, the mobile revolution, as this potential, this area of possibility, to your earlier point, Zainab. And now we're at this moment of true digital transformation because of what has already been done in front of us. And so I think the opportunity here for us is to actually embrace that moment. And we do so through a number of investments in the digital strategy. We do so through the national security strategy, as you mentioned, through the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, through various strategies and initiatives that the U.S. government is rolling out. Our objective, in part, is to make sure that our colleagues on the ground, and by extension our partners across the donor community, across the private sector, understand the digital ecosystem at a country level, can identify its opportunities and maximize those, can identify its risks and minimize those, and make sure that we are moving together in a collaborative construct that is going to really allow us to embrace this moment of digital transformation where we are and where we want to get it to, so that when we're talking about the African Leaders Summit this week, when we're talking about really intractable issues of climate change, or food insecurity, or democratic backsliding, or name your sector, what is going to allow all of those to be more productive and to reach success? It's this economies of scale, it's the interoperable application of digital technologies that cut across all of them, and it's really an overlay of where we've arrived in our development assistance to think of this first and foremost as a pathway to meeting greater success across everything else we do, including on the continent.
Great. We're gonna come back to you in a bit. Benga, thank you for joining us. My question to you is this. If you could tell us, to the extent that you can, what is the key ingredient of your success? You're one of the 7 tech unicorns from the continent. Of course, there are thousands of, if not millions, of tech startups doing a whole range of things, from fintech to health to energy, etc. In fact, there are over 600 tech hubs according to AfriLabs. But not all of these tech, in fact, most of them struggle to expand to scale. The innovations are there. There are hardworking people, lots of dynamic entrepreneurs, but they struggle to achieve a similar level of success that you have. So what is the ingredient to your success? But also, very importantly, what can external partners do to help or support those tech startups? I think Chris has made an important point that some of the support can not only just come via donor funding, but what can be done, really? We have policymakers here. What can they do to help provide that enabling environment, to help support these startups become more successful?
Thank you so much. I think,
Here's a mic.
arguably, there are so many things I can point to as what has helped us to get to this far as a company. However, I think one big piece is our sector, which is fintech or payment. I think there are 3 major pillars that can help Africa to leapfrog. One is payment, one is commerce, and third is logistics. And I think there's a unicorn in each of those sectors, arguably, more than one unicorn to the last speaker. A big piece of that has been the fragmentation of payment in Africa. You know, Africa is highly advanced when it comes to payment. If you go to Kenya, as you guys all know, M-Pesa is so advanced, even beyond Apple Pay in the US here, you know, and it's been there for over a decade, and it works pretty well. The problem is I can't use M-Pesa in Nigeria, or use M-Pesa in South Africa, or use M-Pesa in a different country. So whilst we're so advanced in Africa, country by country, our payment systems are not exportable. You can't use them in other countries. And I think that was one thing that we saw as a Florida way, which is basically, how do we solve the fragmentation of payment systems in Africa and allow that small business in Nairobi to sell to somebody in Lagos? And the payer in Lagos can pay with what they are used to in Lagos to pay that customer in Nairobi or that customer in Accra or in Johannesburg, as the case may be, right? So I think we're building what I call a plumbing infrastructure. Payment is so critical to everything we do in Africa that once we get to a level whereby that infra is built, there can be 1 billion unicorns building on our infrastructure because we're not solving every problem right now, right? So if we solve payment, we solve logistics, we solve commerce, then we can have the true Amazon Africa start. Because how to pay is not a problem. How goods will move from point A to point B is not a problem. But that said, there's so many factors that are preventing that from happening, right? For us to build what we've built today at Florida Wave, we have to literally go to every country in Africa and build that infrastructure and get a license and partner up and connect. And we have over 500 payment partner integrations at Florida Wave that we have to maintain daily, API uptime. That is a lot of work, right? Imagine we are able to unify Africa through just one regulation, one license, and I'm good to go. I'll cut down 6 years of work, 6 years of mistakes, of mishaps, of going to the wrong market at the wrong time by just doing one integration, right, across the continent. So now, new startups who are starting today are leveraging our API for that one connection across Africa. Meanwhile, we built that in 6 years, and we're still building to by the way. The same applies for logistics, right? It's so hard to move across Africa, either you're moving goods or moving people, right? You know, when we're expanding Florida Wave, a major ingredient for my expansion lead was that person must have an American passport. Because it's easier to move across Africa with a US passport than a Nigerian passport, or a Ghanaian passport, or a Kenyan passport, right? And I think breaking down the barriers that we have in Africa today of movement will solve a lot of problems, right? Tourism will be easier. Like, it's easier to wake up in the morning and want to go for holiday in Kenya, Tanzania, than for a Nigerian to wake up and say, I want to go to Tanzania for holiday, right? Because of visas, because of, you know, these barriers. And when there are no barriers of people, trade would naturally flourish, right? And that will create more payment, and that will then create commerce. And when there's commerce happening, and goods can move across the border quicker, that will just transform the entire continent. And that's what I think has happened to China. They were able to build payments, logistics, and commerce. Alibaba is an example of that. WeChat Pay, Alipay. You know, the US is the same for the US as well. You know, you go on Amazon.com and order something, Instacart right now, you can get it in another 30 minutes. Because there's logistics, you get it immediately, it works. So I think for us, it's just, a major piece for us is we're solving in a sector that is fundamental to how things will work in Africa. The help that we require, I think, is basically policies that are aligned towards scaling and encouraging entrepreneurs to scale more in Africa, and also to solve the gaps we have today across the continent. I think we're 1 billion people, but in reality, it's not a 1 billion people market, right? It's a bucket of 100 million maybe in Nigeria, 20 million maybe in Ghana, but it should be one market. And it can be one market if we all come together and build the policies, the frameworks that will govern and allow this to thrive. Thank you.
That's actually very insightful. If I understand you correctly, you're saying that it's absolutely necessary to start with certain fundamental subsectors within tech, right? So start with, as you did, payments, logistics, commerce, which would then allow everything else to flourish. Maybe the reason why tech startups in, just randomly call in a sector here, health, are struggling, or energy are struggling, is because of the absence of logistics, a proper logistical network. If you want to move from point A to point B, even within one country, it's difficult. I think that's very, very interesting. Maybe a question then is, and I don't know if this is a question you can answer, but following on from it is, and before we open up to the audience here, when an entrepreneur sets out to do something, you know, sometimes it's, I mean, I'm not an entrepreneur, but just from what I've read and so on and so forth, sure, sometimes it's informed by a gap they see in the market, but it could also be informed by other considerations. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there a risk that there's a misallocation of talent, that instead of a lot of intelligent, innovative people doing the things you mentioned, they're doing something else? Is there that risk? And if it's there, how can it be addressed? How do you encourage someone who wants to do something else to do payments and logistics and e-commerce?
So good point there, good question. My perspective on that really is, America is great today because there are millions of SMBs who are doing great in America. They don't have to become unicorns, and they would thrive, right? Imagine a scenario whereby we have over 100 million entrepreneurs in Africa hiring maybe, let's say, 10, 20 employees, and they're just a simple $10 million company. That's also okay, right? I think we will scale a lot more if we have so many of those, which is why health is important, right? Which is why biotech is important, investech is important. But I think we will be putting a burden on this company to imagine they all have to become unicorns. They don't have to be unicorns, right? They can run an amazing business that's successful and be a $100 million company, and that's fine, right? But I believe very strongly that, the unicorns can be created maybe a little bit easier in those fundamental sectors, right? But we can build amazing businesses across Africa in health, in, FMCGs, different sectors. And they can also thrive pretty well as well on the continent. And there's a lot of problems to be solved beyond those three sectors that we mentioned. And we're seeing it across today, and we're seeing people trying to solve those problems. Obviously, people's background play a major role in where they go to solve a problem. I used to be an engineer who worked in a bunch of banks and technology companies before starting Flutterwave. So that played a major role in my focus on payments, right? But I think the goal here is having the right enabling environment for entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs, as the case may be, to be able to build and scale companies they work in based on what that sector can achieve as you go along.
Excellent. So we are going to open up. Do you want to?
If I may?
Yeah, very quickly.
Because I think about what you're saying, Megha, and talking again about the digital ecosystem and what those foundational pieces are. Yes, there's a lot still to do in the fintech space, but there still needs to be foundational investments in digital financial services, in connectivity, and other critical pieces that allow services to flourish. And we spend a lot of time thinking about what are those reusable digital building blocks that are not just applicable to this topic of digital transformation, but are applicable to how about when you think about how to accelerate digital transformation. If we were able to say to Flutterwave, if we'd invested in reusable digital building blocks, we could have saved you 7 years of running around the continent. Maybe we could have done it in 2 years. And I'm sure there's a lot of story behind those 7 years that are actually really relevant here. But for the next businesses that do have great ideas and that can put faith in the foundational investments that where the services can be built on top of those rails, if we can accelerate that by making coordinated investments, I think that's really what's going to drive the full capacity of what Lassina was talking about, how you actually meet governments and private sector where they want to be and really quicken that pace. So I think that's certainly something to explore, and we are doing that. There's a lot of talk these days about the value of digital public goods and digital public infrastructure as a way of taking governments where they are, but helping them cut through some of the learnings that companies that we work with have had to face themselves over the years.
Excellent. So we're going to open for questions and answers. We have perhaps about 15 minutes or so. If you could please introduce yourself and the organization you're with and make your question very concise so we can take as many as possible. We have a mic runner, so we're going to start from here. I'll try to go around the room and have gender balance. So this gentleman, that lady, and then someone else here.
Hi, my name is Franklin Amo. I'm with Bayless Emerging Markets. We're an investor in digital infrastructure and digital assets across the continent. My question is sort of piggybacking Chris's last comment, particularly to Lucina and the gentleman with the Kenyan government. Are governments sort of creating focused plans and projects around things like fiber optic networks, data centers, subsea cable and landing stations, such that investors can make sort of focused and capital protected investments in those areas prior to policy developments? How can we work with you to make sure that those policies make sense? Thanks.
Okay, the lady over there.
Do I have to stand up?
No, you can sit.
Hi, I'm Nom Sandongwe. I am a research associate at the James Martin Center for Nonproliferation Studies, but I also worked for the Zimbabwean government as a diplomat in Geneva, and I used to cover ITU as one of my areas. My question is, I have many questions, but she said be concise, so I'm curious, we're talking about digital transformation, but where does that now dovetail with things like energy? Like, how are you going to scale upwards or have these amazing smart cities if there's no electricity, for example? And to add to that, in this era of strategic competition, how does Africa as a continent protect itself so that it can still get the best deals possible, but at the same time, not fall foul of sanctions or whatever else might be happening? Thank you.
Great. Can we come this way? We'll do 3 and then we'll do another round.
Good morning. My name is Nee Simmons. I'm a non-resident fellow at Center Global Development. I also used to work at a World Bank Group. Really quick question. How important is entrepreneurial ecosystems, incubators, co-working spaces, accelerators important to the development of the continent? There's been a conversation I had when I was at the World Bank. One particular country said, are we just throwing money at some of these projects? Are they sustainable? Before I joined the World Bank, my finance hat would say, yes, it's not sustainable, but I would argue these ecosystems are very important. They're like libraries, right? You have a library. You allow people go there to learn. If we have these spaces, young people wouldn't have a place to go get mentorship and technical assistance, that sort of thing. So if you can speak to that, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Actually, let's take a 4th one, just because we have so many.
Thank you very much. My name is Greg Marchand. I'm an entrepreneur and also founder of the Zambian Business Angels Network. And so very curious from Christopher and the CEO for Flutterwave, what role do angels investors on the continent have in the ecosystem, and what could we be doing to work with Smart Africa and governments? Like, what role do we have in the ecosystem, and what would you like to see us do over the next 5 years?
Great. Who wants to go first? Okay, Lucina, and then just go this way.
Yeah, I will take the first questions in the last questions, or maybe I will wait until for the folks intervene. On the infrastructure side, the opportunity to invest in the fiber, in infrastructure in general. One of the initiatives we have is called Intra-Africa Connectivity Project, championed by Guinea. The blueprint was launched 2 years ago. What does that actually mean? It calls for every single African country to be interconnected to at least 2 of its neighbors. Why? We hear about all this Google, Equino, Facebook to Africa. It's all around the continent. The connectivity inside, not their area. Many countries and even within one country which is well connected, many areas are no connectivity. So we are calling for every single country to interconnect to 2 of its neighbors. For example, DRC has 9 neighbors. Guess what? So from that project, we created SPV, special purpose, because once we get to the pilot was run, we interconnected Guinea, Mali, and Sierra Leone. And it's also led by one of our private sector partner, ADS Group. So what we're doing right now, we created SPV, Special Purpose Vehicle, together with the Badia, Bank of Arab and African Investment in Sudan, who are coming in. Africa 50 from Casablanca is chipping in to be able to build that continental backbone in order to reach area where connectivity is not. And also not only that, the past 5 years, Africa compounded annual growth rate on connectivity on internet penetration is about 45%, but internet is still expensive. We're not only doing that. There are areas, in the beginning, the moderator, she mentions 30%, 40% population covers in Africa. In reality, they are more than that because we have area that we call usage gap. What is a usage gap? We have 30% of our population on the continent where there is infrastructure, but people are not using it. Why? For 4 reasons. 1, affordability. It's very expensive. 2, smart devices. People don't have access to buy a laptop and so on and so forth. 3, local context. People don't go. My grandmother will not get internet just to get to Facebook and WhatsApp. It has to be a local context. 4, it's the trust and the confidence on the network, which has to do with cybersecurity. So all of these elements that I just mentioned, we work on. If we're able to work on that from now to 2025, potentially Africa can have a coverage of 70% by 2025. But infrastructure, I'm really inviting you to talk to me afterwards. I can tell you exactly where you can be part of that as an investor in infrastructure. Thank you.
Great. John?
Yeah, thank you. Same question about focus by our governments on the infrastructure. And yes, it touches the entire from the connectivity to the global through submarine cable, terrestrial, and backbone, and also data centers. And governments have worked with private sector to establish data centers. And this is one of the other things we're inviting. We want Africa to be a data hub. We want to have regional engagement to ensure we have strong platforms for data processing. And we are open to invite African and global players to work with us in this. There are a lot of policies that are aligned to this, and using the example of Kenya, of a commitment to digitize 100%. That's a huge opportunity to digitize 100% at the policy level. That opens doors for good engagement with the African continent. A question about the entrepreneurial ecosystem. U.S. has made a very big achievement in the entire innovation and the high-tech technologies, and Silicon Valley always comes up as a model we'll always want to think of, and that's why in Africa, in Kenya, we thought of the Silicon Savannah as almost a replica of this. And to achieve this, to achieve sustainability, you realize we need to do a lot of efforts. One is the IIN talent, institutions like Stanford and others. And we are working on seeing how we can leverage and linkage with our top institutions in the continent to top institutions across the world, and writing on global platforms. Recently, we have the International Association of Science Parks, which brings top science parks across the world, that Africa can be part of it. We established something called Global Alliance of Special Economic Zones, which also brings technology or International Association of Science Parks as a component to see how Africa can leverage and connect. So for sustainability and also grassroots. There is also innovation hubs. You mentioned we have several innovation hubs across the country. We're trying to break and see connectivity across the continent, with Smart Africa being one of them. We also want to use our regional blocks. We have the East African Community and many others. And we are seeing how to leverage and work as one as regional blocks as we graduate more to the African Free Trade Area. And I think that presents a huge opportunity for us. There was also a question about power. And I think we are doing quite a lot currently in terms of power, going towards sustainability, exploiting the more green power, geothermals, and connecting. Recently, Kenya and Ethiopia has connected power. We have connected to Tanzania. So, and you already connected to Uganda, and we will see more connections across the region to ensure we have sufficient power to run, because the demands for data centers will be huge, smart cities, there will be huge demand for power. So as a region, there is quite a lot. And the question asked about angel investors and the network, I think their role is quite critical. When we look at building the innovation and the startup ecosystem in the country, we see the importance of universities is very important, the importance of startups and the funding for the startups, linkage to high-tech companies, and then the angel investors are quite critical in that. And I think all the countries across the continent are ready and willing to engage, and it's better even to engage at the regional levels, whether it's African community, African free trade area, to see how those platforms can enable even what Penga is talking about, because we must break those barriers. And just to show the indications, I think in the last few months, Kenya has opened up visas free to South Africa now. From January, you don't need a visa. I think we got another country within the last few weeks. So if we can open our borders more, I think what Penga mentioned would really be a strong possibility.
Chris, anything you
Sure, I
want to
think
address?
just a brief point to angel investors, but also all investors. We've talked a lot about the successes of Africa and their digital transformation, and haven't really explored so much the gaps. So this panel, I think there was a framing online that really noted that still most of Africa is offline. And so to Lucina's point about making sure that we are looking at not just the traditional economic hubs in the capitals, but also looking at the more remote and rural communities, and really recognizing where there are opportunities to build out infrastructure there so that more Africans can embrace today's digital age. One approach that USAID does to address that is through a flagship project of the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment called Digital Invest, where we are actually using blended finance to build up fund managers' capacity to invest in more riskier environments, including remote communities where there isn't as much demand, let's say, as in more urban areas, but also in areas of fintech too, to say through capacity building, through technical assistance, through our ability to perhaps buy down some of that risk, where can we motivate investors to explore the non-traditional areas that are really going to pave the way for broader uptick? And one quick example of that is in Liberia, where we had previously worked a lot with Google and their C-Squared affiliate to build a fiber ring around Monrovia. Well, we are now taking that a step further, and through Digital Invest, we are working with C-Squared and others to build that backbone, 350 kilometers of backbone, so that it touches Cote d'Ivoire, so that it touches Guinea, to Lucina's point about making sure that countries actually can communicate and interact across borders. That's where the real next phase of growth is going to be. And so through investments, we highly encourage folks who are interested in capitalizing on those that haven't yet had the opportunity to embrace what's happening in digital age, to give them a chance to do so, and to do so in a way that advances their socioeconomic livelihoods.
Penga?
I will address the point about ecosystems and accelerators. They are very important in Africa. We went through Y Combinator, for example, in Mountain View, California, and that was pivotal to our growth as a company. We're able to raise capital, we're able to see other folks from all over the world doing what we're trying to do and learn from them. So that is unparalleled. I think there needs to be a lot more venture building startups, accelerators, to help startups grow faster in Africa. Regarding angel investors, I think they are really angels, to be honest, and they're very important in the ecosystem. When we were starting, there wasn't a lot of angel investing in Africa, right, by Africans, right? But now there's a lot of that because people have seen what has happened with Flutterwave, with other companies who have done pretty well reasonably. So I think there needs to be a lot more angel investors in Africa. Africa also needs to invest in itself, right? Folks who know the continent, the countries, are better placed first seed or first checks in a company than somebody who is far away, right? And I think people like us in this room, if we're able to back one company each by as small as 10K check, 20K checks, plus with with all the mentoring required, all the support required, that alone can go a long way in helping a company to go from finding product market fit, right, and being able to move and scale. So I think those are pretty important points in how we scale this. Thank you.
Right. So we're going to do another round. It's probably going to be the final round, and then we'll have to end. I know the lady's question was not addressed, and we'll come to that. Let's start from this side this time around, and then move that way. The lady. Sorry, this gentleman. He raised his. No, we missed him earlier.
Thank you very much. My name is Ode from Accountability Lab. I'm from Nigeria. My question comes from the angle of illicit financial flow. Over 50 to 60 billion dollars leave Africa almost every year. I think this is an important conversation to see how the US is also trying to think about this, because most of this, you can look at it from a digital perspective where monies are being transferred illegally out of Africa, illegally earned funds and all that. So how are we thinking about mitigating this in this context? Thank you.
The lady over there, and then this gentleman here. Oof.
Hi, good morning. My name is Chisom Azudo. My question is, so Wenga noted that there's some difficulty with unification of policy, especially, and also difficulty in mobility of people, goods and services across Africa. So my question is, so there's been a lot of talk about the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. How can that actually be leveraged in terms of what needs to be done in, say, 5-10 years to increase ease of doing business across the African continent? And who's actually responsible for driving that? Is it the private sector that's supposed to be pushing the government to make sure that this happens? And if yes, what steps can the private sector take to increase government will? Thank you.
Okay, the gentleman there. And then
Good morning. My name is John. I come from Tanzania, and I had previously worked for a telco, a bank, an FMCG, as well as a regulator, and many of which have a footprint pan-African. So I was wondering, to what extent can partnerships be done with some of these multinational corporations to advance digital inclusion on the continent? And then the second question that I had was...
One question, sorry. This gentleman here.
Yes, good morning, Oumar Diallo. I'm the director in charge of FinTech and Innovation at the Financial Markets Authority in Canada. I would like to know how North American regulators and regulators in general could support addressing the fragmentation of the regulatory landscape on the continent to support payment systems and the rest. Thank you.
Okay. The lady there, and then we'll have to move. Sorry.
Hello, my name is Farida. I work with the Economic Growth and Private Sector Development Portfolio at Palladium. My question is very straightforward. This is the U.S. Africa Summit. The U.S. is going into a recession. U.S. funding constitutes pretty significant capital inflows to Africa. What does that bode for the ecosystem in Africa, because U.S. companies are not getting as much funding, valuations are reducing? Are we going to seek intra-African partnerships? Are we going to take on more debt? What's our vision for that?
Okay. The lady there, and then the gentleman. And that one too.
Thank you. My name is Anne-Marie Plubel, and I'm doing work with Developing Radio Partners. And that comes to my question, which has actually to do maybe micro and macro at the same time, signal. So the question, I know where these are very macro conversations that are being held, but since the digitization, if you will, the signal side of this is that, in fact, you have about a 10%, I hear 30% being quoted, capacity with respect to the digital and virtual at this point, bandwidth of all of the issues that have been identified, whereas radio is at the 80% last mile. We're working in many areas Lussophone, Francophone, and so forth, English, Malawi, Cameroon, we're looking at Somalia and so forth now, Nigeria and so forth. And we are youth, women, health, climate, water. There's a trusted space, you talked about that, in the very local tribal communities. So I just want to put radio back on the radar here and see where it fits in the entire, or the signal fits into the entire scope here of getting to the last mile. Thank you.
The gentleman there, and then the one behind him.
Greetings. My name is Farzam, founder of Future Trends Group. Apologies. I just came from Dubai, that's why. It's a comment and statement, maybe information, then you can respond. Future Trends Africa Manifesto, which I wrote half a year ago, has created a mega movement throughout the whole of Africa. It's called the Collective Peaceful Rise of Africa. Why collective? Because it is not one by one piecemeal anymore. You have to take the entire continent as one. And it's Pan-African. We can call United States of Africa, whatever you like to call it. Definitely the fundamental foundations are the key. So this movement is from Africa, by Africa, in Africa, for Africa, but for export. It's reversal. Africa does not need a lot of import of capital. It is fully wealthy of capital. It has to be a mega rise in a fast time. You can study me. I was the force behind the rise of China, so I'm now taking the whole thing to Africa. So I'm just stating this because I really need all of your help. And also, I'd like to say that I create a vortex.
Thank you very much.
Converge, merge, integrate, aggregate, digitalize, multiply, and that's for Africa's future.
Thank you. The gentleman over there behind him.
Thank you. My name is Stephen Avery. I'm from the University of Pennsylvania. I work with the Global Health Catalyst to address cancer needs around the world. My question is around equity in this digital transformation. We see some countries have a big disparity in education and access to healthcare. Why do you believe that this transformation would be different? Will we see the same countries flourish while others may continue to struggle?
Great. We're going to take two more, and then we'll have to conclude. Goodness, so many. I don't know. Start with the person close to you, and then we'll get to someone at the back.
Thank you. My name is Stephen Murray with Cross Boundary. I wanted to double click a little bit more on that, on the infrastructure question, particularly shared infrastructure, and how from a regulatory perspective we can encourage more of that. Just to give you a tangible example, in the U.S., just with towers alone, the average number of tenants is close to 3, whereas in Africa, that same tower has the average tenant of 1.2. It's a huge leverage opportunity. So we'd love to kind of hear from regulators how we can increase more shared infrastructure. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, goodness. The gentleman there, and then the lady at the back, and that's it. Sorry, guys. Okay. Otherwise, we're going to be here the whole day.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Alan Chesang from Kenya, one of the youngest senators in my country, and also the ICT chairman in my committee. So mine is just a quick one. I'm a champion of fintech, and I've actually one of the senators who has placed a bill in my parliament. And the challenges that we have is, I think we have we need to invest in education foundation, because even the governments in Africa does not understand what fintech and really cryptocurrency is. So, as Mr. Christopher said, I just want to. My question is, I need to ask what ways, or because I feel this is the most challenging thing that we have in Africa. How do you, how do you think, how do you advise on how to educate Africa about blockchains and just fintech in general? Thank you.
Great.
New technologies.
The lady at the back.
Oh, thank you, Vivian Birchall with the Global Health Catalyst. So I'm passionate about healthcare, and if we saw anything from the pandemic, it was the disparity. So as we're talking about digitization, what kind of investment are we putting forward to bridge the healthcare disparities, maybe through telehealth between the United States and the continent of Africa? And I say this because I worked for previously, in my previous life, with the government of Uganda, and there was a NEPAD program called eSchool program. It was to introduce ICT in the rural areas. And when we're talking about access and helping these rural communities, we have a young generation on the continent of Africa. If they cannot even use the computers because they don't have access to that kind of training, how are they going to help their aging parents in healthcare and other sectors? So how
Thank you
can
very
we
much.
invest?
Thank you. Unfortunately, those are all the questions we can take. I'm really sorry. We gosh. Okay. Now, can you give her the mic?
That's interesting.
Please make it quick.
Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you so much for having given us the opportunity to attend from Tunisia, Basma Soussi. I have a visual impairment and I am with a friend of mine who is deaf. And my question will be direct. What role can be played by persons with disability in all this digital transformation? Persons who are in a way marginalized, how can they get a voice through digitalization? And my essential question is about women with disability. What can their role be in such a world, and women in general, seeing as discrimination, poverty, and marginalization are so close to persons with disability and to women in general? Thank you for answering.
Thank you so much. I'm glad we're able to squeeze that in. I think it's a very important question. So we cannot address all of them, but I'm glad you had the opportunity to speak, and hopefully after the formal event, we still have coffee and drinks outside, and you can chat and follow up with the speakers who are still here. So we have to conclude now, but I want to emphasize on a couple of things that we've heard. Disability, I'm so glad we're able to squeeze that in. A lot of our smartphones are touchscreen. There are no, those, I don't know what you call them. Yeah, yes, there are just so many blind spots here. People with disability, how do we make sure that they are included among other marginalized groups? Then another question on the recession, the forecasts about a recession next year in the US, given that the bulk of capital flows in the digital sector are coming from the US. What does that mean? How should African countries prepare for that? Another question on shared infrastructure, I think is very important. And then the one on how North American regulators can help reduce fragmentation. If there's any question you want to address, just one very quickly, and then we round up. Should I start? Actually, let's start the other way around. Benga, do you want to start, and then we come this way?
Yeah, I'll just go real quick. One point the gentleman noted about money flows across Africa to the US, illicit or legal. I think a big piece about why we started Florida was because if you wire money from Nigeria to Ghana, you go from Nigeria to New York to Ghana. So if you go on a plane with that money, you get there faster in 1 hour. I think leveraging the African trade payments platform, the PAPS, to your question, it will be a solution here in regards to, obviously, it should be governments regulated, obviously, and it's driven as well. From a question on valuation, I think, obviously, now we need to be a bit more responsible in building companies, right? We must go for companies that are more sustainable than for valuation goals, right? As recession comes to the US and capital dries up across board. Thank you.
Yeah. Chris?
Great. 2 very quick points. On accessibility, the primary focus for us when we talk about investing and fostering in digital ecosystems is to make sure that they are open, inclusive, and secure. If we are not factoring inclusive development for those who have accessibility challenges, for underserved communities, for anything else, then we actually are undermining that digital ecosystem that we want to enhance. So that is a critical piece to that. And then quickly on regulatory support from North America and also what to do amid a recession. I think what we've been able to prove through a number of our global alliances like the Better Than Cash Alliance and the Alliance for Affordable Internet that have donors, that have private sector, that have civil society and other actors is where we can find that fusion of business case and development case, then that's where we're going to be able to motivate organizations, private sector, and other actors to responsibly invest in Africa's digital transformation. And there's a lot where the business case and the development case overlaps. So I'm actually very encouraged, even amid the face of recession, that we can actually do what we need to do collectively to make this work.
John, 1 point.
Yeah, about shared infrastructure, I think this is an important thing, especially now we go to digital space, starting with even governments to ensure we have a clear architecture for each country linking with the other so that we can optimize and not duplicate. Also now on the other side of infrastructure like radio, is it terrestrial, is having a clarity and engaging the private sector to ensure there is an optimal engagement for shared infrastructure. There is one other question about disability. I think digitization provides a better environment for enabling people with disabilities to do better. And also in our innovation and research is how do we empower them to exercise their full rights and participation by adoption of the digital tools. Lastly, the aspect of the challenges within the American business environment and Africa. I think if we look, we might find areas of synergies because Africa does not just need capital investment. Probably we have resource, which is our young people. They could be the answer to the challenges that the U.S. are facing. And this is an area we need to look and leverage, maybe through some training, capacity building, and it could be the solution that American region are facing.
Fasina?
Yeah, I'll try to address few. In fact, the money leaving Africa, whatever. I think the fundamental problem we see here is the KYC, continental KYC. The Africa intra-trade represents about 19%, and the European, it represents 70%. Why? We don't trade with each other because we don't know each other. The private sector have been driving the KYC. In Nigeria, for example, we see Norway outside the continent. So we have launched a digital ID, which is based on Smart Africa Trust Alliance, to be able for Nigeria to talk to Ghana. It's a data exchange platform which allows the identity to be interoperable in order to build that trust, because it again goes back to CFTA, Continental Free Trade Area, where Smart Africa is playing a key role in the digital trade protocol. Because we cannot, continental free trade means free movement of people and good. Who are you and what are you what are you shipping across, just like my brother was saying for e-commerce space. So the KYC, continental KYC will resolve that. And coming back to, I think, capacity building, blockchain, it has to do with the capacity building. It's one thing to prepare the future for the current generations, and it's another thing to prepare current generation for the future. It's very different. So capacity building is something Smart Africa is really engaged in. I just came from California. We brought about 25 decision makers to Thunderbird ASU, Arizona State University, for global leadership training. And we do have a different kind of training, tech entrepreneur, advanced skills, blockchain, emerging technology, artificial intelligence. You can get hold of me after the meeting. Thank you.
Excellent. On that note, I think we'll have to conclude here. Thank you very much to our panelists, to our distinguished speakers for the excellent insights they have shared. I have certainly learned a lot from this. And as I mentioned to all of you, this is really not a one-off conversation. We have an active line of work in this area that is growing and developing. But very importantly, thank you to all of you who joined us here in person. We have a very full room. Given that there are parallel events, it is a testament to how important this topic is, that all of you showed up and you stayed until the very end. And to also those who joined us virtually, thank you so much. And of course, to the team at the Carnegie Endowment, the Africa Program, our colleagues at COMS, thank you very much for organizing such a fantastic event. I wish you an excellent rest of the summit. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Should we take a
I think we should take.
Oops. I'll take it.